welcome to the first half of sports. Uplifting Athletes is an organization that shines a light on a number of different rare diseases. It began at Penn State University but has now spread to several other colleges and universities across the country. A few weeks ago, WYLN's Ken Kara headed to Harrisburg to interview the executive director of Uplifting Athletes, Scott Shirley, who explains how the organization got started and much more.
The 2012 Penn State football team went from being written off by many to writing their own successful and unforgettable chapter of Penn State football history. While there were a lot of reasons for their success, one big one may have been a preseason tradition started by a member of a Penn State recruiting class that was just as overlooked as the 2012 football team.
In fact, my recruiting class, Kenny, you and I have talked about that before, we only had 16 scholarships to offer in the incoming class of '99. We were considered the worst recruiting class in the country. And the worst recruiting class in Penn State history. We ended up going to 2 bowl games, and on the field we were about average, but we graduated all of our guys. I think 12 out of 16 of us have master's degrees or higher. 9 of us have started charities. I mean, you can't develop a more well-rounded group of young men than what Joe did with the worst recruiting class in school history.
After finding out his father had kidney cancer, former Penn State wide receiver Scott Shirley, along with 2 other members of the Penn State recruiting class of 1999, offensive tackle Damon Jones and center Dave Koslow, organized the first ever Lift for Life event. Lift for Life grew into an organization called Uplifting Athletes that now has chapters at 16 different schools across the country, fighting 16 different rare diseases. When things started to take off for Uplifting Athletes, Shirley made what had to be a tough decision. Here's Larry Bankert of a group called Success with Honor that works with Uplifting Athletes.
I'm a civil engineer grad, Scott's a civil engineer grad, and he gave up a full-time job and took a chance to start an organization. It may not be as lucrative as civil engineering for him, but he knew that that was the right thing to do.
6 years ago, when I wrote the business plan with a friend, Dave Wozniak, I took it to Sue Paterno to review because I didn't really want to bother Joe, and it drove Joe nuts that he wasn't invited to be a part of that meeting. So Sue and I sat around the kitchen table, and Joe laid out back sunbathing while we reviewed the business plan before I left my job in D.C. to do this full time.
The business plan has worked, and along with helping those suffering with rare diseases, Uplifting Athletes is also helping the athletes who are doing the uplifting.
As I've been traveling across the country trying to spread our program, a lot of the programs are skeptical that we can deliver this experience that we're talking about. And they really challenge me. I candidly tell them that I haven't found a team that doesn't have a handful of really good kids. I also haven't found a team that doesn't have a handful of knuckleheads. You know, there's no team that's exempt from either of those extremes. But what determines the character of the team is which group has more influence. And a lot of times, that path to influence is a lot easier for the knuckleheads, because it's a lot easier to have guys follow you down to frat row or have guys follow you, into trouble. And when I played at Penn State, I majored in engineering, and guys weren't following me to the library on a Friday night. But once I had Uplifting Athletes as a vehicle, other guys were able to jump on board.
Shirley says Uplifting Athletes succeeds where the NCAA falls short with some of their programs because each Uplifting Athletes chapter is organized and run by the players.
When something happens, when Mark Herzlich is diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma at Boston College, he's their star linebacker, captain of the team, and it's a devastating blow to that team. Everybody's kind of looking around saying, I wish I could do something to help, or I'd love to help, but they don't have any direction. And Uplifting Athletes provided that team with a direction, with a way to respond to that situation.
Here's how Uplifting Athletes may have helped the 2012 Penn State football team on the field.
I selfishly think that Uplifting Athletes has helped kind of transition the Penn State team and stabilize the team because, as I mentioned off camera, the free report came out the day before last year's Lift for Life event. And Lift for Life happened just as it had the 9 years prior. It wasn't in response to anything. It wasn't trying to make a statement. It was just, this is Penn State student athletes and Penn State fans doing what we do. We're literally helping to cure rare diseases that nobody else has really cared about.
Very cool story there by Ken Kara. If you want to find out more information more information about Uplifting Athletes, you could check out their website at upliftingathletes.org. And Gownley coming back after the break. Stick around.